was born, I was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong or no reason to think that anything was wrong with me. Growing up, I played soccer, I swam, I went to school, and I loved school. One day I was 7, I was in 2nd grade, I woke up one morning and I started vomiting blood. My parents took me to Virtua, and there they told my parents that I was too sick, and I was transferred to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I was admitted in their ICU for about a week, and I was diagnosed with a rare liver disease called Crowley disease. This basically meant that the bile ducts in my liver were malformed, and it was causing scarring in my liver called cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is something you typically see in someone that suffers from alcoholism. Because of my cirrhosis, it was causing the little blood vessels in my body to swell, especially in my esophagus, and those little vessels were bursting, and that was causing the bleeding. So I had a number of procedures done, mostly called endoscopies, where they put a camera down your throat under sedation, and they're able to clip or cauterize those little vessels. I had endoscopies done about every month for about a year. This, along with medications, kept me pretty healthy. I was placed on the transplant waiting list, but I was very low priority. So I was pretty healthy for a number of years. I was able to play soccer, I swam, I went to school. I was a typical kid growing up. In 8th grade, I started getting chronic infections in my liver called cholangitis, and these infections would also spread to my pancreas, causing something called pancreatitis. If you've ever heard of pancreatitis, it's extremely painful. I don't recommend it. I had these infections pretty much every single month from September to June of my 8th grade year, and about 1 week every single month I would land in the hospital with these infections. At first, we were able to keep these infections at bay with oral antibiotics or pills, but eventually the bug just outsmarted us. The only option was to place an IV line and do IV antibiotics. So I had an IV line placed. It's called a PICC line. It's like a permanent IV line placed to my arm, and a tubing goes all the way up and around to my heart. A PICC line is also known as a central line, so those have put you at very high risk of infection. That infection can also spread to your heart if it gets infected. So the big thing was keeping this line dry. This meant I couldn't go swimming, couldn't go in the pools, the oceans, I couldn't be on the swim team. It also meant that when I showered, I had to wrap my arm in saran wrap just to keep it dry. Every week I would have a nurse come out to my house, and she would do a dressing change, and that was trying to prevent as much infection as we could. The next thing was trying to keep this line in place. That meant I could not play contact sports. I had to stop playing soccer. That was something I absolutely loved to do, so that was very hard. I also couldn't play in gym class, so I had to sit out in gym. I also really liked gym. And then I couldn't play with my little cousins in fear of the line getting ripped out. I was able to keep this line in for 295 days. As far as my antibiotics, they were given every 6 hours. So this meant that every day I would go sit in the nurse's office for an hour and get my medication. I was constantly missing class because of it. If I went on a field trip for school, there had to be a nurse provided, otherwise I couldn't go, and there was not always a nurse provided for me. I had to get my medication every day at 5 o'clock. This meant I had to be home after school. I couldn't go out with my friends late, and I would get my medication again at 5 in the morning. So this meant my mom would wake up every day at 5 in the morning and give me my medication. Couldn't have sleepovers with my friends. I couldn't really go anywhere without my parents being there. So this was really hard, and I felt very isolated because of it. I couldn't, I was missing out on a lot of things, but I was just happy that I was home and in the hospital. Because of the central line, we were able to get me bumped up on the transplant waiting list, but still I didn't really think anything of it. I still felt relatively healthy. I was still going to school, and I was still home. So because I was on the transplant waiting list, anytime I left the state, I had to let my transplant team know. So in July, between my 8th grade and freshman year, I went on a trip with my family. I could only go on a trip for a week at a time because my medication was delivered by the pharmacy weekly because it had to be refrigerated. When we returned home from the trip, we got a phone call from my coordinator. She's just verifying that I was back home. I let them know I was back home in Cherry Hill. She said, "Good, you're number 3, sit tight, we'll let you know if anything changes." We never heard anything, and we didn't really think much of it. A week later, on July 22nd, 2011, it was 6 o'clock. I was making dinner with my mom when we received a phone call, and again, it was my transplant coordinator. This time she said, "We have a potential match. Can you come in?" We dropped everything. We went to the hospital. They got me checked into a room. They did a ton of blood work. They did imaging, x-rays, EKGs, making sure that I was a prime candidate for a liver transplant. They let me know that everything looked good and that it was a waiting game. So I saw a bunch of nurses, doctors, surgeons came to evaluate me, and they went to retrieve the organ. At around midnight, we were made aware that it was a match, and around 1 in the morning, they started my transplant surgery. Around 8 o'clock in the morning, I was out of surgery with a new liver, and I spent about 3 days in the ICU and another 4 days on the surgical floor. And exactly 1 week after I received my phone call, I was discharged from the hospital after my liver transplant. I was determined to start freshman year of high school on time. I was not going to be the kid who missed the first day of school, so I spent the rest of the summer recovering and spending time with my family, and I was able to start high school on time. I was at school for 2 days before I got sick. Because of my liver being foreign to my body, your body's at risk for attacking it, or something called rejection, when your body rejects the organ. To prevent this, you're on a medication called immunosuppressants. After surgery, you are on really high doses of immunosuppressants. Because of this immunosuppressants, you're at risk for getting infections, and unfortunately, I got two. I got two viruses called EBV and CMV. I was out of school, and I missed the entire first semester of my freshman year. I was able to go back to school in the spring, and I was able to finish out the year. I went back to playing soccer, I went back to swimming, I was going to school full time, and I finally was involved again. I had the quality of life I didn't have before my transplant. And this is all thanks to my donor. I've gone on to graduate from high school, I went on to college, I graduated from Widener University in 2019 with my Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, and I currently work next door at Jefferson Hospital in Cherry Hill. I've been there for 3 years, and I'm a nurse on their med-surg unit. All of this is because of my donor. My donor's name was Bobby. He was in his early 20s when he died. We've had letters back and forth with his family, and his mom let me know that he had made the decision to become an organ donor. So when he did die, it was an easy decision for them. His mom let me know in his letters that me doing well and being back in school brought her a lot of comfort. She said that even though he wasn't here, part of him has lived on, and that helped her through the grieving process. Before being listed for my transplant, my parents didn't know a lot about organ donation. They checked the little box in their driver's license, but didn't know what it meant. Now I go out and I talk to schools because I want you guys to make an informed decision. One day you'll be getting your driver's license. Most people don't know what it means to check that little box. My hope is that you guys are able to check that box or make an informed decision that is right for you with the appropriate information. My hope is that you can go home and talk to your parents, your siblings, your friends, and bring the topic of organ donation to the table. Thank you.